Good morning. How is everyone this morning? Good. Well, welcome to the first annual Soul Awards, which is a wonderful celebration of who we are and what we do. It's very exciting that we have the opportunity to do this, especially with a new president who's coming in, who brings with him a spirit of entrepreneurship and engagement. Let me take a few minutes, however, first, before we begin, to thank members of the awards committee. They include Brad Combs. If you would please, as I call your name, would you please stand? Brad Combs, James Walden, Lynn Zajac, Suki Kim. Brad just came in, so Brad, remain standing if you would. And we could not have done this without the leadership, of course, of Samantha Langley, our Associate Provost. We are grateful for the spirit that she has brought to these awards and to the enthusiasm that this university has for creativity and scholarship. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome our new president, President Vaidya. Please come and join us. I'm sorry, I pronounced that wrong. It's Vaidya.
That's right. Good morning. Oh, we go. It's the small crowd, but we can get started. That's great. Yes, thank you so much. When I got the invitation and I heard this was the first time we were doing this, I really got really excited about this. I know we highlight the work of our faculty, staff, and students in research, scholarship, and creative activity, but to really set aside this day, Samantha was just telling me we had over 80 submissions, and given the time constraints and the space constraints, we could only accommodate, about 30, yes, through the day today. And so we're going to start brainstorming about how we can expand this next year so that we really do allow all our faculty to be able to share the wonderful work that they're doing. I just wanted to say a couple of things. Firstly, thank you all of you for being here. I just saw a quick glance at the schedule and of course, the lovely brochure we put aside. I've already got some ideas of what we need to do with some of that to send it to our folks who maybe fully don't appreciate the work that happens at a university. And the idea that actually, as it turns out, today, there was a meeting of the Council of Post-Secondary Education in Frankfurt, and I didn't want to go because of this event, and we had a couple of other things going on campus. So, of course, I said to my provost, I said, Sue, you have to go on my behalf. And, of course, the provost is supposed to do everything the president says. As you can see clearly, that is not happening. She came back to the office and she said, today is a big day for faculty scholarship. I want to be here. We want to do the awards. And, of course, I said, there's no question. So we sent someone else, didn't we? So but no, it really is. The notion of telling our story, and I've been here a little over 3 months now, getting on to 4 months, and every day I learn something new, something amazing, and something inspiring about what NKU has been doing, and especially with respect to its impact on students and its impact on the region, and quite frankly, beyond. I think, and I don't say that about NKU, I talk about it in general, public higher education does not do a great job of telling our story. And we have experts on the campus when it comes to telling stories. And so we're going to tap into some of that expertise about how we can better craft the story and the narrative about the role and the value and the purpose of higher education, in particular institutions like NKU. I think some of the bigger schools who shall remain nameless don't have to worry about that too much, but I think we do. I was noticing on the website, Brian, I think a quote that you had about the whole purpose of the Soul, about the Soul Award, but the SOS, the idea that this is a way for us to demonstrate how much of a difference we make in the region, in beyond, making the world a little bit better, in some cases a lot better. Just had a great conversation with one of our faculty colleagues about the work he's doing with NASA instrumentation and some of the other great work that we have on this campus. And I'm not so sure, perhaps it is, but I'm not so sure that those stories get told as much as they do. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is making sure we do that every opportunity we get, no matter where it is. As it turns out, I happen to be in meeting with a couple of legislative committees of Frankfurt today on campus. We're hosting them. And I will find a way to insert this information to them as well. Quite often, the narrative is all about the immediate. What are we doing for workforce tomorrow? Yes, we have to respond to that. And I'm not at all shy about saying, yes, we have to make sure our students are career ready, our students, but they're also engaged to be community members. It means a lot more, especially in today's time, that our students are not just out there working in jobs, but they're making a difference in the lives of their organizations, their companies, and beyond as well. And so the work that we do, especially the work that the faculty are doing in engaging our students in research, not just graduate students, but undergraduate students in research, is truly remarkable and something that I think we should really take great pride in. So I am truly honored and privileged to be able to be here. I'm going to stick around for a little bit to see some of the amazing presentations. I was just looking at at the schedule. Of course, the big one, we've got Women in Coffee project that I'm like very intrigued about. There's just so many things that are going on. And what I really liked about so much of the work is it spans all the disciplines. And there are so many interdisciplinary aspects to the work that we're doing as well, not just one or two of the kinds of things. The impact is regional, it's national, it's even global. And that's what makes it special. We are place-based institutions. We are anchor institutions for this region. And I think we just have to tell our story in much more meaningful ways to everyone, even if they're not prepared to listen to it. I think we have to do that as we start changing people's perception of what a great institution this is and the work that happens. So again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to stop by for a little bit. I'm going to be here for a bit, and I'll turn it back over to you, Brian. Thank you again.
You're next. I'm actually here to introduce Sam Langley, our Vice Provost, who will introduce our next speaker.
Actually, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes first. So for the speakers that are here, we do have our wonderful colleagues from Research, Grants, and Contracts that are timing you today because we do have a tight schedule. And so pay attention to Mary Uji. She's hardcore and she's going to keep you on task. So she will be flashing signs refresh my memory. She'll be flashing signs for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then when she stands up, that means it's a wrap, okay? We are having lunch today, so please join us for lunch over in the UC ballroom. And during lunch, Mark Wasisco from the College of Education and Human Services will be giving, I think, a very entertaining presentation, so please join us for that. Even if you have to come and go, we'd like you to join us for lunch. This afternoon, when we break into concurrent sessions, some of the sessions will be here, and some will be over in our new Health Innovation Center, room 515, Kim, is that right? And so you'll see in your program, depending on which panel you want to go to, you can either stay here or go over to room 515. And then I just would ask, as we all know, these bleachers are squeaky, so I realize people are going to have to come and go, but if you could wait until a break between speakers, I know they'd appreciate that. So with that, I'm happy to introduce our first speaker, Cecile Marczinski, who's a professor of psychological sciences, is going to talk to us about her research with energy drinks and alcohol. Find the file. Should be ready to go.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Sam, for the introduction. This is a really exciting day. I looked over the program, and it's too bad I have to teach a little bit during the day because I'd like to go to everything. There's so many interesting speakers and very broad diversity of scholarship and creative activity that's being discussed today. So thank you so much for including me in the program. What I'd like to talk about today is some of my work that I do. It's laboratory-based work on addiction. It's in the Department of Psychological Science. And lately I've been focusing on how we can look at the field sobriety test and what that tells us about addiction and the abuse potential of alcohol. I'd like to mention, first of all, usually we put acknowledgments at the end of a talk, but I'd like to put it at the beginning because this work is all with undergraduate students only. I don't have grad students. And so the work that I'm doing, I think, is actually pretty great cutting edge work, and it's all done with students here that are undergrads. So that doesn't happen easily, as many faculty members know who are in this room. Undergrads are a special case of, you're taking somebody brand new, they don't have any preconceived notions about what research is like, but they also don't know how to do it. So it can be tricky, but it can be really fun, and you see your students develop over time, and some of the students on these slides now are actually finishing their PhD, and wouldn't it be awesome if we could recruit them back to Kentucky to teach in our programs? Another thing that I'd like to point out to you is that when you work with students, it's easier to work with students if you have the funds, whether that's internal funds or external. I've been really very fortunate to get several external grants. These funds not only pay for the research, but they pay for the students, and they allow the students to allocate their time to work with me as opposed to somewhere else. And so having funds for students is critical, I think, to really develop great research. So I've had grants from the Kentucky Biomedical Research Infrastructure Network. Mark Barget runs that program here, and he's the coordinator. If you want to talk to him about that, it's health-related research that they fund. And I've also had R15 grants. These are grants from the National Institute of Health that, again, are grants that fund work related to public health. And they are specifically, R15 grants are specifically for developing research with undergraduate students. So our institution is perfect for that type of grant mechanism. So I'm sure the grant people can talk to you if you're interested in a bit more information. So I do research on alcohol. When it comes to addiction, alcohol is one of these drugs that everyone is familiar with, but they don't realize oftentimes how many people in the United States struggle with alcohol problems. So when you look at the criteria for what is drinking too much, it's 15 drinks per week for men or more, 8 or more drinks for women. That's too much, and we have a large portion of our population that 38 million adults that just drink too much. Then they don't talk about it to a health professional. Health professionals don't even ask most of the time, and it causes liver damage and it causes brain damage. It's insidious because drinking problems develop slowly over time, like most addictions, but alcohol specifically is a very insidious sort of slow trajectory upward, and then most people don't ask for help until they're very much struggling with alcohol problems. And so understanding when people drink socially, how that transitions to problem drinking is sort of the basis of some of the work that I'm doing. When you look at drinking problems in addiction in general is a problem of young people. So it's appropriate for a university to look at this. When you look at the age prevalence of binge drinking or drinking to intoxication, the rates are very high in late adolescence, and then they peak in young adulthood. And then after that, about age 26, it starts to decline after that. It doesn't mean that older people don't struggle with alcohol problems, but the majority of harms and hazards of excessive drinking are problems of young people. And obviously we don't want the trajectory of their lives to be derailed by addiction. And so understanding how we can keep young people safe is sort of what I like to study. Another thing to point out is that university settings struggle with this. We are interested about retaining our students being successful. 1 in 4 academic problems is tied to excessive drinking. So if we can curtail excessive drinking and keep drinking in moderation, our students will be academically more successful. 1 in 5 students meet the criteria for alcohol dependence. We have significant problems with legal problems, date rape issues. A lot of those things are tied to alcohol, so understanding alcohol problems can curtail a lot of these issues. I have been studying lately about what increases the abuse potential of alcohol. And when I started to get interested in this issue, I guess now it's been a decade, what I was noticing is that how people drink, the actual choices they make of the drinks they choose to drink, perhaps is escalating the problems of alcohol. So if you look at the Monitoring the Future data set, this is a very large data set, comprehensive look at not only alcohol use, but all substance use. What you can see is that there's a certain number of people, particularly young people, who consume alcohol with energy drinks or high caffeine energy drink mixers. And it's appealing to the underage and emerging adult drinkers. So people my age and older don't particularly enjoy a Red Bull and vodka. That's a drink of younger people. And so, you know, you might think, okay, well, that's interesting. But when you look at the harms and hazards that come from drinking, whenever people drink alcohol, there are risks that are listed here, like binge drinking or becoming intoxicated, driving while impaired, risky sexual behavior, needing medical treatment, and that could be anything like I was walking along and I wasn't really steady on my feet, so I tripped and I have a sprained ankle because I was drinking, to very extreme accidents, risk of alcohol dependence. All of these things happen with drinking. But when people looked at, in a comprehensive set of literature across many different studies using different methodologies, we found that people who consume energy drinks with alcohol have a higher risk of all of these problems. And I'm going to focus on drinking to intoxication, the risk of alcohol dependence. And I'm one of the few people who actually said, you know what, let's do some lab studies. Let's understand why these drinks are risky, because some of these methodologies are huge survey samples. They're very compelling evidence that this increased the risk of drinking. Energy drinks might increase the abuse potential of alcohol. But when you do a lab study, you have total control. And lab studies don't need to be complicated. In fact, lab studies can be rather simple, and undergraduate students can do these lab studies. So I'll show you a couple of things. But first of all, just what was my going in hypothesis or idea about why these drinks matter? Why does it matter to put a high caffeine drink mixer into alcohol? Well, the first thing is, in the literature, we know that caffeine increases the preference and consumption of foods. So if you put caffeine into anything, people generally like it. There's a limit to it, of course. Jennifer Temple, a friend of mine who is at the University of Buffalo, she does a lot of just straight caffeine work, and she's tried putting caffeine in all kinds of things, and usually kids and adults, they like it. Broccoli is an exception. She tried. So when you put caffeine into anything, people prefer it. The other thing is alcohol is a sedative drug. When you are tired and sedated, that, I think, is the cue that tells you, okay, you know, maybe it's time to stop drinking and go to bed. And that internal cue of sedation is probably protective. But when you add in a strong stimulant, like an energy drink, I think you alter that cue. So that leads people to not want to stop drinking. They keep drinking. It probably increases the reinforcing properties of alcohol. The things that people like about alcohol that makes them drink, the caffeine enhances that. So they actually enjoy the experience more. Now, that's easy to say that, but you need data from experiments to show that. So a couple of different ways to show that. So this was a simple study I published last year with some of my students. Not only are the students running the subjects, they are in the lab collecting the data. These are students who are part of these studies as the subjects. And so they get paid to be part of these studies. You know, you have lots of different possibilities of, you know, students being engaged in this research. We brought people into the lab. They had different doses of drinks. They had alcohol that was mixed with energy drinks or alcohol with a standard drink. I just told them you have 10 cups to drink over 2 hours, drink as fast as you want. And so the different doses, if you focus on the red line, this is the alcohol versus the alcohol and energy drink. So for the red line with no caffeine at the top there, you see it took them about 80 minutes to consume those 10 drinks. It was about, you know, a drink or two an hour. So about a steady pace. But you can see that when the alcohol was mixed with the energy drink, they drank 20 minutes faster. So the whole process of drinking is more rewarding or reinforcing or enjoyable. They're drinking faster. Maybe it's even the stimulant is getting them to drink faster. But that's a problem because once you finish your drink, what do? You order another one, right? So that shows they're drinking faster. I was also concerned about impaired driving. Obviously, that's a large public health concern. So on the left side, you can see that this is another study we published this year. We looked at their breath alcohol concentrations across time. And we tested them initially when blood alcohol was rising around 30 minutes. They were given some drinks. And then later on, we tested them again as their blood alcohol was declining. Usually when people drive, it's their blood alcohol is declining. It's later in the evening. They decide to stop drinking. People generally do not recognize how long it takes for blood alcohol to drop out of their system. So they usually are likely to drive while their blood alcohol is elevated. And so in this study, what you can see, if you just focus on the right side, the alcohol versus the alcohol and energy drink, when we ask people in a different lab study, how willing are you to drive? You can see that when they don't get alcohol, they're very willing to drive. When they are given alcohol, they are not willing to drive. On a rating scale of 0 to 100, they only rate about a 20. But with the alcohol and energy drink condition, they're pretty accurate in saying, no, I'm not really safe to drive when blood alcohol is rising. But when blood alcohol is declining, that's when they are becoming more willing to drive. So this, again, is a simple lab study that corresponds very nicely with the larger data sets that come from other institutions that have looked at drunk driving rates. And they're saying energy drinks is a risk factor. If you drink alcohol and you add in an energy drink, you're more likely to drive impaired. You're more likely to be charged with impaired driving. This lab study shows you that adding in that stimulant is probably affecting your ability to assess how impaired you are. And so across a series of studies, we've published things that really show that adding an energy drink into alcohol increases the abuse potential of alcohol. It makes you desire to drink more, you want to drink faster, you feel less intoxicated, you have a greater willingness to drive. And then in this last study, we were interested in, is it only about the person and how they're feeling, or is other things going on? Are they getting feedback from other people about how they look impairment-wise? And this came from actually a couple of legal cases I worked on where I testified, and people would report that people who consume a lot of energy drinks, they don't look impaired. They might talk with slurred speech, but when they walk around, they don't really look impaired. And so we looked at this by starting with the field sobriety test. We basically were examining the standardized field sobriety test, walking a straight line, standing on one leg. There's different components of the field sobriety test. And we said, the field sobriety test is really about motor performance. When people drink too much, they can't stand up straight, they have poor balance, and the police officers are relying on that clue to breathalyze them. So remember that you cannot be breathalyzed unless, I'm just going to skip forward. So in this study, we looked at balance. We used this machine to measure balance. When people are balancing, here you can see that without caffeine and the alcohol, they are swaying a lot. That's that top dark line. Under alcohol, they sway a lot. When they have the energy drink in their drink, they sway less. They don't look impaired to other people. So in other words, with these field sobriety tests or with balance and coordination measured more precisely with computer equipment, which was paid for by these grants, the BioSway, we also have now shown with the field sobriety test the same thing. So if you ask people to stand on a right leg, they can't really do it with alcohol by itself, but they look almost sober with the energy drink, which is a problem for police officers. But the other thing that I think is important is that it tells us that probably poor balance and coordination is actually a good thing. It's a clue that we're impaired, and it decreases drug-induced reward. So when people don't feel those clues that they're imbalanced when they're drinking, they're going to keep drinking. They feel more sober, and that's a risk factor that increases the abuse potential for alcohol. And so the question is, can we use this? We know that in chronic alcoholics, they have poor balance all the time, drinking or not. So their difference between their sober state and their impaired state is very much a non-discrepant difference. So can we train chronic alcoholics to have better balance? You know, there's all kinds of things we can do. There's like training for balance. There's like yoga where you stand on one foot and do the tree and things like that. All those sorts of things. Maybe that will help them train their balance, and then they would have a better clue that excessive drinking is a problem. You know, it's an open question that I'm thinking about exploring. Also, the field sobriety test, you know, we'll see. You know, I'm working on, you know, can we automate things or do other things? So I think I'm out of time. Yeah. So thanks to all my students. Thanks for the grant support. I'm getting the off the stage mention. So thanks, everyone. Oh. Okay. Step up.
So next up, we have Sara Drabik from Electronic Media and Broadcasting, who's going to talk to us about women in coffee.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Start my own timer, too. So yes, I am Professor Sara Drabik. I'm here in the Electronic Media and Broadcasting program. My area of focus in my teaching and my scholarly and research is non-fiction storytelling, specifically documentary filmmaking. So I'm going to talk to you about the Women in Coffee Project. How many coffee drinkers do we have here? I see it sitting in front of you. How many of you might actually say you can't function in the morning without your coffee? Everyone's like, kind of, I feel a little embarrassed. Yeah, well, same. Coffee is a huge part of our culture, right? It's a part of our morning rituals. It's something that we do at work, like, hey, let's talk about this. We'll go get a cup of coffee. In college, I became pretty addicted to coffee, but I had honestly never thought too much about where that bean came from, right? Like, I was all about the how do I process it at the end and what makes it taste great for me, but what kind of happened to get that bean to where I am today? So even though I'm really passionate about nonfiction storytelling, I think stories are how we learn about the world. I knew it's what I wanted to do with my life. I never thought I'd get this involved with coffee. This was not something that I set out for when I started the tenure track here in 2011. 2011? Yeah. So, but in 2013, I was introduced to the International Women's Coffee Alliance through a friend of a friend, right? That's how things get started. It's just kind of the people that you might know. So as you can see from here, their mission is to empower women in the international coffee community to achieve meaningful and sustainable lives and to encourage and recognize the participation of women in all aspects of the coffee industry. I didn't know that women played a huge role in the coffee industry. I kind of had no idea, again, where that coffee came from. But I went, well, that sounds interesting. My friend who's involved in this, who was a founder of this organization, knows what I do in storytelling, and said, I would love for you to come down to our 3rd international conference in Guatemala. We've been around for 10 years, and I'd like you to help document the conference and gather the stories of the women and the people that are there to kind of share with other members to help it grow, but also to share with the sponsors of this conference to talk about how great we are, so they give money for the conference again. So again, I went, okay, that sounds great. So she invited me to this conference. It was in February of 2013, but as part of the conference, she said, hey, since you really don't know a lot about coffee, why don't you come to these educational coffee farm tours beforehand? You can spend 2 days traveling around to these different coffee farms and learn a little more about the process so you know what to ask when you do these questions at the conference and you're telling these stories. And I said, that sounds great. I like coffee. So here's this is our group that went out there. I got to spend 2 days with all these women and 2 men. There were men at the conference. That were from India, Indonesia, Japan, Great Britain, across the U.S., and of course across Guatemala. And I learned more in those 2 days about coffee than I ever thought possible in the world. And I became intrigued about the role of women, in some ways the plight of women in some areas around the world, and the challenges to get that little bean to us so that we can enjoy our coffee, as some people are as they come in. So I'm going to show you a brief clip. Hopefully the technology here, we had some issues this morning, will work, of that piece. Again, this was kind of made for the conference sponsors, but it will give you a little bit of a taste. So, maybe.
One of the most important and
Okay, it's still not wanting to actually show that. So if you will all bear with me for just a second, we're just going to do this kind of old school.
So one of the most important and exciting things that has happened in this convention in Guatemala is that we signed 2 new chapters to IWCA. And the chapters that signed with us in this convention is the chapter from India and the chapter from the Philippines.
India is small in the coffee world, but huge potential. And, across the world, this whole women in coffee idea is sort of slowly emerging. And this is something we need to be a part of, because clearly women are getting a bad deal. And clearly, if women are positioned differently in the whole coffee world, the coffee world itself will look different. that moment, I have to admit, where there were so many women and the clapping and our Indian national flag behind us, all of that, I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking to you. It did make me feel as though something big is, we are ready for something big. And being part of the team that's going to make it happen is, I cannot describe the feeling.
Okay, so that was a really quick clip, but what really got me was Rohini, when she was talking about that clearly women are getting a bad deal. And I said, well, what is this bad deal? And where she was really excited about this signing with the IWCA, the chapter, that this was going to make this big difference for her and the women across the country of India who worked in coffee. And I thought, how? What does that mean? How is the IWCA going to help? Is it something that they've already done in other countries? Where is this going? So I got kind of really into this. I gave them this project. They liked it. I gave them all the transcripts from all the interviews, and I gave them my observational footage for them to have kind of as an archive. And I said, I want to know more. So luckily, with their support and the support of Northern Kentucky University, I have been able to now travel to 5 different countries. This is us when we went to India. We've been to Tanzania, South Africa, back to Guatemala twice, conducted over 30 long-form qualitative interviews, got, I don't even know, like terabytes of footage as far as observational footage of women and the changes that are happening throughout the world thanks to the work of the IWCA and other organizations that are working with this as well. So I've taken all of this. This has been used by the International Trade Center, by the International Women's Coffee Alliance, by the different chapters in various countries. But right now I'm currently working on putting this together into a documentary that addresses more consumers within the United States. So again, if you'll bear with me, I will try to find that clip here really quickly to show you. So this is, I have to say, a work in progress. Please be aware of that.
First thing I wake up in the morning is have a cup of coffee or 2. It may be 1 espresso, it may be 1 drip coffee.
I think that the main thing people should understand is how much work it takes to produce a single pound of coffee. Let's say a single cup of coffee. So many people have to do so much hard work to get that coffee produced and in your hand and roasted appropriately and prepared appropriately. It's a bloody miracle that we ever get a decent cup of coffee.
This is incredibly hard. Americans are fairly clueless as to how a bean becomes a seed, becomes a cup of coffee.
More than 80%, and in some countries 90% of the labor is women. Very few women were employed in positions of authority or of leadership.
The coffee business is mainly managed by men. There are many women in the coffee business, but sometimes they are like invisible. You don't see them.
Women, they do cultivating, weeding, everything about the farm. But at the end of the day, men take the money for the use. IWCA help women in coffee. It helps me to know the participation of women, because we found that women, we are doing so many work and we are not benefited. So it inspired me to know. It helped me to meet other women in the world.
There's still a lot of work, there's still a lot that needs to be done. A lot of societies have not embraced this, but it's in the right path now, I would say.
So again, a very brief look at where we're at now, and I think I opened the wrong one here. Yes, sorry about that. So very brief look at where I'm at now. Things that I have learned from this, it started off being about women in coffee, and there's still a huge focus there, but I've learned a lot about the other challenges that face coffee and the women who are working in it and their communities, and a big one is climate change. If you're really into a good cup of coffee, you should be very worried. because most of the climates where coffee is grown, it's getting warmer and warmer, and they're having to move further up the mountain, and that is incredibly expensive, and that is incredibly time-consuming, not always possible. And so a lot of the farmers are getting priced out, and so it's not worth it for them to grow coffee. I don't know if you caught the stat in there that Mumbala from the International Trade Center shared, that usually about 80, in some places 90% of the work is done by women. A lot of it is work that requires a lot of dexterity, and so they have the smaller hands that can pick the coffee as it needs to be, that can graft the coffee to create better varietals. So they're really involved in the entire process, and in some countries until the very end, when they have the coffee that they take up to weigh to get paid, and that is when their husband comes and takes the bag of coffee to get weighed and get paid. We know from a lot of other studies that if we empower women and give them more of the finances in their family, that that money tends to go to the family, that it goes to education, that it goes back into the community. And so that is a lot of the work that the IWCA is doing. They're creating entrepreneurship opportunities for women, so that they can learn how to be more on the business side of things, and they can grow better coffee and be able to sustain it in this changing climate. So when I did go back to India, it was 4 years later after Rohini said she was so excited that they were signing in a chapter. And there was progress that had been made. I learned about a lot of the initiatives that the IWCA was working on, and they are simple things. It's slow. This has been a long process. I've been working on this for 5 years, but to see change, it takes a long time, especially in some of these different cultures and communities. So something as simple as helping to provide eggs and protein to the women of the families, because they tend to feed their children first and feed the husbands, then they go out into the field all day and they don't get the protein that they need. So very simple programs that we might look at and go, well, that's pretty easy. It was very difficult to get started in some of these communities, though. And so I'm really excited that I've gotten the stories of this and been able to show it as it progressed, and hopefully be able to stick with it to see how it does change in India and in other countries, in Tanzania and South Africa and some of the other places that I've been. So what has this work done so far? It's been used by the IWCA, the International Trade Center. I was super excited that it was used by the Syed Business School in Oxford, England. I was happy to have an acknowledgement in their big program on their forum on women in the world economy. I did not get an invite to go to Oxford, England, though, so I was, I'll just take this. This was great. But another really awesome thing was that when one of the times I was in Guatemala, I got to meet Allison Aubrey from NPR, if we have any other NPR geeks in the room. She was covering the conference down there. I got to talk to her, and so the piece that I was working on was featured in her piece on Coffee Week in NPR, and the link is still live on the NPR site. So again, the geek in me, I'm like, Allison Aubrey, took my picture and everything. It was great. But one of the coolest things that's happened from this is that it has spawned some great work in our study abroad program. The first place that I went to visit in Guatemala, I have now taken students there twice on different study abroad trips. Some of them are here. Hi, thanks for coming. So we have gone and stayed at this coffee plantation in Los Andes and met the people and actually worked and picked some of the coffee and told some of their stories. So they have gotten to see that amazing connection between who produces the stuff that they then drink, because this actual farm is a direct trade partner with Coffee Emporium. So if you know Coffee Emporium in Cincinnati, we got to work with Tony and Eileen there. And so they went, they saw the people who did this work, they saw the work that was involved, and then they got to actually drink that coffee, and now they can go there and buy that coffee and know and have that connection. It's very seldom that we get to have that kind of connection. And I did have a clip to show you, but I don't think we quite have time for it. So I'm not going to go into that, but so I'll go past this, and I know I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to get to the thank you slide. So I will say that I had no idea where this was going to go when I started this research. It's been very exciting. It's had a lot of little milestones along the way for myself and my students. We have involved other departments on campus, world languages. We had Spanish students who helped translate for us some stuff that came from Guatemala. And the last time we went, Dr. Larson from the Spanish department came with us. I know she's going to be possibly setting up a study abroad there. There are so many opportunities there: biology, environmental sciences, education, global supply chain management. So if we have anyone who's interested in partnering and doing a study abroad, all for it. That would be fantastic. And the work continues. The IWCA has invited me and two of our students, one of them is here today, Molly Klinkenberg, hi. We are going to be going to Rwanda in February to film and gather stories at the African International Fine Coffee Association Conference. At this conference, it is going to be the first time ever that a woman is the keynote speaker. And this is incredibly significant for this conference. The woman is Phyllis Johnson, who's a member of the IWCA, because when the IWCA first formed and had a breakfast there at a conference several years ago, they invited men to come to it, and it was not received well. They thought it was going to tear apart families. They thought it was going to be a really bad thing to provide this training and empowerment for women. And now they've invited Phyllis to be a keynote speaker, and they're embracing it. And so I'm really excited to go there and be able to capture those stories. And I think I'm about at 15. So I will say thank you all so much for coming. Enjoy that coffee and think about everyone involved when you're doing so. And I will happily take any questions. If there are any.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great. Just a couple notes while we're doing our little transition here. For the speakers, if you step away from the microphone, we're not capturing you. And remember, we're recording this for the archives. So even the questions, I know it's hard because we're all teachers, right? And we want to be walking around, but you're not mic'd. And so if we're going to pick up your questions, you have to stay close to the microphone. Second, I forgot to announce that not only are we asking you to join us for lunch, but we're having a reception this afternoon as well. The provost will give an award at around 4:30ish, and then we'll have some hors d'oeuvres and social time after that. So please join us for that as well if you're able. So with that, our next speaker is David Childs, who is with the Department of Teacher Education, who's going to talk to us about teaching away hate and racial stereotypes. Welcome, David. You have until 10:05 because we'll cut you off for questions. Okay? So early, or are we early? We're running a little early. And Mary, right here, is going to flash you your time card, so you'll know when you get time to questions. Okay? All right.
Time to make that change. We are the people who can do it. Time to make that change. We are the people who can do it. Time to make that change. We are the people who can do it. Time to make that change. We are the people who can do it. Well, it's time to make that change. We are the people who can do it. Well, it's time to make that change. We are the people who can do it. Yeah. I grew up in a musical household, so everything we do, we incorporate music or incorporate singing. Truly, it's time to make that change. People in this room can make a difference, and that's what I'm all about. And that really stems, is connected to my research and the talk that I'm going to give. Teaching away hate, challenging racial stereotypes in popular culture within social studies and history classrooms. The classroom can really make a difference. Teachers can make a difference, especially in the environment that we live in today and the times that we're in right now. There are two Americas. United we stand, divided we fall. As you saw the image here, this has become a common image in our time, an image of tension, strife, differences, racial tension. And it behooves us to think about ways that we can bring about real change. But as I said, there's two Americas. There is the America that poor folks live in. There's America that black folks live in. Then there's America that the elite live in, or folks that choose not to think about the tension, the racial tension that's going on. Folks that say, if it doesn't affect me, then I don't have to think about it. Folks that says racism doesn't exist because I don't experience it. But divided we fall. People can continue to live in their gated communities or live in ignorance if they want to, but at some point it's going to catch up with us. So we have to come together. We have to talk about unity in meaningful ways. And all of the onus cannot be on people of color, but we have to work together. All of the heavy lifting cannot be placed on people of color. One of the things I talk about in my classes is that often when we talk about racial reconciliation, all of the burden is placed on black folks or Hispanics or brown folks or people of color. And folks say racial problems should be resolved by people of color, but that's not going to work because both sides have to participate. Racism comes from the majority race often, and racism is often shifted to African Americans. So, here we go. That's where I wanted to be. There's a need for more spaces in classrooms to discuss issues surrounding racism and stereotypes. So we have the notion of safe spaces in the academy or in classrooms, and sometimes there's collective eye rolling when people talk about safe spaces, but there really needs to be safe spaces. What's a safe space? A place where people can feel comfortable sharing what's on their hearts. People can feel comfortable without fear of retaliation or judgment to share what they're going through. The classroom should be a safe space. And if ever we need a safe spaces, it's in our time today to have students of color come in and share what their experience is like. We can't always assume we can speak for others. We should never speak for others. We should listen to what students are going through, students of color, even on this campus. Because often students of color are told what they need, are told what their problem is, are told what their challenges is. But how will folks know if they don't sit down and listen? And the classroom really is the optimal place for this to happen. And to talk about uncomfortable conversations, there's a book that I want you to write down, Courageous Conversations About Race. It's by Glenn Singleton. It's a field guide to have these conversations. Glenn Singleton, Courageous Conversations About Race. You should get it. And he really talks about facilitating a dialogue to talk about race in the tough conversations. Guess what? When you talk about race, you're going to always be uncomfortable. And often people feel guilty just coming to the table. I shouldn't have to apologize for what other people did. I didn't live during slavery days, etc. and so forth, all those kinds of things. But I want to give you a news flash. You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be an uncomfortable topic. In fact, many things in life that we talk about that are important, it's going to be uncomfortable. Frederick Douglass said he believed nothing good comes without a struggle, without a challenge. You're going to be challenged. You know what? You should look inward. You shouldn't begin the excuse making, like I'm not racist, I'm not da-da-da-da. And then we shut down. But we need to have some real live conversations. We're on a college campus. We should talk about these issues, and we should be thinking about it. And it starts with ourselves. A lot of times we use what I call the metaphor of the shovel. When folks are talking about these conversations, we say that's other people. So we're using the metaphorical shovel, the proverbial shovel, but we need the rake. We need to bring that into ourselves. These conversations have to start with the self. Okay, I'm going to get into some of my research here. These are some questions I begin to ask as I begin to do this kind of research. In what ways are African American stereotypes perpetuated through popular culture in general? And so this project in general looks at African Americans, but it can be really extrapolated to black and brown folks in general, folks of color. So how are stereotypes perpetuated in popular culture? That is the media, music, movies, the news, Fox News, news stations, news outlets, headlines, etc. and so forth. Rap videos, hip-hop videos, all kinds of music that's out there. How are stereotypes perpetuated? In what ways can we discuss and analyze African American stereotypes through popular culture in social studies classrooms? Okay, so this applies to K-12 folks as well as university professors. How can it be a space to facilitate these conversations? How are historic stereotypes about African Americans reflected in popular culture and media today? Okay, moving forward. So this is my thesis statement. The research explores how history and social science educators at high schools and universities can develop curricula rooted in cultural studies theoretical framework that helps students understand how negative ideas about people of color are often socially constructed through media and popular culture. So that's the crux of it. The theoretical framework that I pull from is cultural studies. There's a couple of things I'm drawing from. It's grounded in historical methods, historical research, but the theoretical framework comes out of Stuart Hall's work, cultural studies, the social construction of race, and media studies. I gave a talk similar to this, or I applied some of this research in the talk I gave, I think about a month ago, give or take. So if you were at my other talk recently, you'll see some of the material, you'll hear some of the things I talked about during that time. So this is a circuit of culture. This is a what's the word I'm thinking of? A theoretical framework, or it'll come back to me. This is a graphic. This is a graphic that really describes cultural studies framework. Production. So at the top you have production. The media puts out things. They put out messages. They put out images. They put out language. All of the things that we consume. And we often, in media studies, we critique the notion that it's just entertainment. For the most part, especially nowadays when we're watching a film, when we're watching television, there's a world view. There's sometimes a political objective put forth. There's some ideology that's put forth, and that we're told to believe, or that it's suggested that we believe that. So it's put out there. It's not just entertainment most of the times. And we consume it. Looking to the right, then it's regulated, then representation. That's how it's played out in society. Then we form our identity from the media, and then it's a cycle. This is their theory. Okay, conceptual framework. That's the word I'm looking for. This is a conceptual framework. And this is what Stuart Hall argues. Because a lot of youth will say, well, I'm not going to just watch something and go out and do it. That's not the idea. It's subtle. The messages that we hear. For example, how women are portrayed in the media, how women are objectified. If we continue to see images of women being objectified, it will become a part of who we are and how we think about things. The same with race. If we keep seeing African American men portrayed as thugs all of our life, as criminals, every movie we see just about is we see African Americans selling drugs. We see African American men being angry and violent. We see African American women being unreasonable and sexually promiscuous and those kinds of things. If we consume this for a lifetime, if we continue to consume these images, it becomes a part of our understanding of what black folks should be doing. That's what this theory is about, okay? So what I've done is included, as time permits, a sample curriculum of how I have been implementing this in my classrooms and in my teaching. So these are some objectives. Maybe I'll just pull one out. Number 3, students will be able to critically analyze their own self-image apart from images and messages advanced in society. And number 4, students will be able to recognize that much of the images displayed in popular culture does not accurately reflect the totality of the contemporary black experience and worldview. So these are Common Core standards for education folks in the room, or even university professors that want to look at the standards that you can pull from to ground your objectives, to tie your objectives to. I'm not going to go into these. So what do we mean when we say race is socially constructed? I'll spend the end of my time really dealing with this, then I'll skip to the end. What do we mean when we say socially constructed? Social constructionism is a theory of knowledge in various fields of study, including sociology, education, history, communication. Social constructivist theory examines the development of jointly constructed understandings in the world that form the basis for shared assumptions about reality. The theory centers on the notion that human beings rationalize their experience by creating models of the social world and share and reify these models through language. So language, by speaking about things, we construct a sort of reality. Race as a social construction. In terms of the social construction of race, based on Leeds-Hertwitz's definition, there has been historically the development of jointly constructed understandings of race and ethnicity in the U.S. These understandings about what race is have indeed formed the basis for shared assumptions. So society has a shared assumption about race, about what it is black folks should be doing, what it is a person like me, when I'm driving down the street, they assume I'm a criminal. And I've been pulled over on this campus wrongly and to be honest, harassed by the police because people have a mental model about what it is black men should do. I don't belong here. I couldn't be a university professor here because of the social construction of race. So in this same way, I just did a talk. Dr. Bolin and I did a talk where she looked at the biological piece and I looked at the social construct, and we ironed out the fact that race is not a biological thing. It's not a thing, but at the same time, society makes it a thing. So just because we understand that scientifically there's no basis for race, at the same time, society makes it a thing. So we still have to deal with it accordingly. So this gets into some of the historical context of race. Unjust laws have helped construct the ideas of racism. Early Southern laws that systematically dehumanized black people, black codes. So there's been a long history of creating what we know as race today through laws, okay? And I'm skipping on here. Popular culture, the media, and bad science have helped to construct our ideas about race. We can help students place discussion about racial stereotypes and African American identity within a historical context. And so these are some of the images that advertisers use to perpetuate negative images of African Americans. And if we, again, see this for a lifetime, then we come to understand this is what black folks should be doing. Here's another one, the black folk as the clown, the comic relief, the Fresh Prince type character that we come to love. But African Americans, of course, can do more than that, okay? The brute, the black brute. African Americans should just shut up and dribble, as the common phrase was said about LeBron James, that he can't be an intellectual, but of course he turns around and starts his own school. But people are stuck in these mental models about what black men should do. So just in closing, let me show you this too. These are some assessments that I've used in this curriculum. Games, a game depicting inequality. I have students create games, board games in the classroom that talk about inequality. I have students create graphic novels and comic books that talk about inequality and that deal with the issue of race, research paper, of course. And throughout a class, I will have discussions and ask questions. So just some concluding thoughts. Media literacy can bring about change. Popular culture reinforces old stereotypes. It's important that youth embrace difference. Social studies and history classrooms should be sites for change, a space for the development of critical thinkers. That's all I have.
get it set up.
So while Chris is setting up, I'm going to introduce him. This is Chris Strobel from Electronic and Media Broadcasting, who's going to talk to us about some documentary work that he did in Cape Town, South Africa.
All right, good morning. So what I'm going to talk about today is mostly about at the big picture about our study abroad program that we run in electronic media and broadcasting, but specifically about some work that we did this past summer in South Africa in conjunction with the theater program on campus. The different dots that we have here, the different places that we that have highlighted, are all places that the electronic media and broadcasting program has gone over the past 6 years. And when we go and we visit different places, let me rephrase that. It's places that have gone and are going. This coming year, we will be going to the Czech Republic and we're going to Rwanda. We haven't gone there yet. But when we go to these places, one of the things that we try to do is engage with the community that we're in, both just from the cultural point of view, but when we're bringing our students there, we're bringing some level of expertise as well. And so hopefully we can leverage that expertise to both further the students' education, but then potentially make an impact on the community that we are visiting and getting to know. And I've highlighted three of them. They're a little bit bigger. One's Belize, one's Sri Lanka, and one's South Africa. I'll get back to that in just a second. But a little bit about what we do and why we do it. We have made study abroad a requirement for the electronic media and broadcasting program for our majors. Study abroad or study away. There are some other ways of studying about an international perspective if you cannot get yourself on an airplane or for other reasons. But our ideal is that people are going with us to be able to learn and create media elsewhere. The requirement is in our third year. So just now, we typically like our abroad programs to be juniors and seniors, so we're starting to get to that, hopefully, critical mass of folks who are going to be traveling with us more. We've traveled to at least one country over the past 6 years, and this has been a pretty big draw for our recruitment. That is one thing when I'm talking with potential students, and I say, usually they'll ask, do you do study abroad? And I say, yeah, that's a requirement. And the students' faces light up, and the parents' faces kind of droop. And then we talk about funding, which is usually why the parents' faces droop, and all of that. And then, but hopefully it's going to continue to grow. Let's see here. So reasons that we did this is, one, we realized that media is worldwide, and it's immediately worldwide with YouTube, with Vimeo, with all, Facebook video, whatever. That our students are coming to our program to be media storytellers, to tell stories through screens and through speakers. And the fact that that story can have an impact here or abroad, I think that's important. I think it's also important to realize how much importance our media has overseas. 4 years ago, when we were going through South Africa for the first time, I drove from Johannesburg down to Port Elizabeth, and every radio station and every place that we stayed at, every radio station was playing Western music, and every place we stopped for food, if there was a TV on, it was usually on VH1, or it was on some other American station. So we have a lot of influence, and I think that's important for our students to understand. We want there to be a personal perspective shift for our students, and I think almost without exception, I probably could say without exception, but I don't want to go that far, almost without exception, I think that happens. It's also a differentiator for our graduates. When a student is looking to get a job, most of the time you have to have a demo reel. You got to show people that you know what you're doing. And yes, you can make a commercial or you can make a project and it's for, I don't know, Bob's Car Wash. And it could be great. But if you're also doing a project for Meshach's Bike Shop in the Westlake Township of South Africa, there is a notice, that will gain more notice. And even though they're really probably the same, although we could talk about logistics about getting to South Africa and shooting there, if the quality is the same, the quality is the same, but there is that, oh, wow, that's cool. And that helps with the future for that particular student. And then also this is, we like to have an impact. And that's why we do this, right? One of the themes of NKU right now is, how are we going to change the world? And hopefully that's part of what we're going to do here. This particular one that this last summer was with a partnership with theater. The initial partnership with theater started in Sri Lanka 2 years ago. Daryl Harris has had an ongoing project in Sri Lanka, and a couple of students and I were able to go there to document what he was doing, and then we expanded out on some other storytelling opportunities while we were there. But that started our conversation about working with theater. And then also our digital cinema class and acting for the camera class or upper level acting class in theater, we've started co-locating, co-teaching those classes. So Corey Danley and I went to South Africa this last time. And she brought three theater students, along with our 9 electronic media students. And it's been a really nice relationship to build both inside of our class, but to have that experience there. So the theater students are able to provide on-camera experience. They conducted our interviews. They were able to see what it's like to really be on location with the production crew. And then our production students, who, while we do interviews, that's part of it, we're able to focus on the technical aspects of the storytelling and work with talent, and then also work with the client. So it was a very nice partnership. So that was the Sri Lanka part, and that was, well, I mentioned the Sri Lanka part earlier with Daryl, and that was kind of where we built. This is also built a little bit on what we were doing in Belize 3 or 4 years ago. I went down with a couple of students, and we embedded with Dr. Hume's class, an anthropology class, doing a long-term longitudinal study on sugarcane farming. Which, when we were talking about with Sarah's project earlier about fair trade and the question about that, there was a lot about sugar and fair trade and what is fair. And it was real interesting to see what we could document there and start to build. And so many parallels in what you're doing with coffee, too. But those kind of embedments really kind of led us to what we're doing, or what we did in South Africa. So, what did we do in South Africa? Initially, the class met informally. It was a summer class. But we met informally after spring break to prepare, to prep, to assure that we were technically ready, to make plans, to figure out some of the media that we could do. And then we traveled for 3 weeks in May. The structure allowed for flexibility of schedule and efficiency in price. We were able to take advantage of the last summer of being able to have tuition waived for our study abroad students during the summer. So it was they were just covering the travel costs. And our goal was to engage with the local population. And yeah, that really did happen. Our partner in South Africa is Nelson Mandela University. This is our 3rd time that we went down and worked with NMU. It really was a charm, I think, and it really has, that idea of most things aren't perfect right away, right? You've got to have iteration. You've got to have a process. You've got to have time to be able to get things right. And I'm not sure that it was exactly right by any means, but our first year there, we spent a lot of time in a classroom and a lot of time on campus and a little bit of time in South Africa in Port Elizabeth. And our second year, we expanded out to Cape Town, and we were more of a 50-50-ish. And this last experience, we were able to experience South Africa, I don't know, 80% of the time, and spend about Well, I'll get to the time in a second, but it was much more engaging, and it was much more efficient use and effective use of our time in South Africa. Because we're in a different culture, we should take advantage of that, learn about that, and learn about both there and then learn about us at the same time. It has been pretty successful. We just had a conversation with Nico from NMU, who runs their programs there, and they say that they're going to look to adopt our model at least a little bit more in the future, because it has proven to be fairly successful, fairly popular, and I think fairly effective. What we did when we were down there, we spent 1 week in Cape Town. We traveled for 2 days to Mossel Bay. Through Mossel Bay as we're going to Port Elizabeth. If you're not familiar with the geography of South Africa, Cape Town is on the western Cape, down at the tip. Mossel Bay is about halfway through. And then Port Elizabeth's on the eastern Cape, near the tip. The reason really to go to Mossel Bay is because there's shark cage diving there. And that was quite the experience. But beyond that, it's probably the most beautiful part of South Africa. Just lush and beautiful. So it was a great time to not have to travel 8 hours in one day, break it up a little bit, and be able to shark cage dive. While we were there, we were able to spend about half of our time engaged with a client. We'll get to the client in just a second. But to actually work with South Africans and to be able to again, learn about what they're doing and help them with what they're doing, and then learn for us. We spend about 40% of our time with cultural activities. That includes nature stuff, includes we went to a theater show there, fairly profane theater show that we found out once we were there. And all the students are looking at me. I'm like, yeah, it's okay, it's okay. And then we spend about 10% of our time learning from scholars. So some of the stuff that we did learn a lot about the culture. We spent a lot of time doing all of this stuff. Everything from, of course, you have to go on a safari and see some elephants. And yeah, that was about, I don't know, he was probably about 8 feet from us. We did go to a safari that did have some giraffes. Giraffes aren't actually native to South Africa, but some of the safaris have them there. We were able to spend some time with, this is in the red location. It's where the anti-apartheid movement really kind of started. Stephen Biko, some other people in Port Elizabeth. So we're spending some time with the mamas who were heavily engaged in the anti-apartheid movement. Hiked Table Mountain. We got very close to sharks. We visited with some kids. We were charged by a rhino. His wife and baby were on the other side of the street. We drove fast. And we made a lot of media. But mostly we just had a really beautiful time. But the important part of why we went down is really to work with New Leaf. New Leaf is a startup company. It is co-owned by a graduate of our program, and they are working with a dozen startups in the Westlake Township of Cape Town. If you don't know what a township is, this is the entirety of one of our clients' houses, also her business, where she and her 3 kids live. So that's a township, and they're fairly large. We created media to help these businesses start up. These were our clients. Each of these are a business owner, along with our students and Corey there. And they were businesses from a bike shop that I mentioned earlier, a couple of restaurants, an importer of textiles, a perfume maker, all over the place. And the nice thing about what New Leaf is trying to do, it's not businesses to expand and have a franchise across South Africa. It's businesses to help build Westlake, their township, and improve the lives of the environment there. So we shot documentaries. Documentaries are probably too strong. We shot promotionals for their microloans, for their web pages, to be able to help them gain more investment to be more successful. And as an example of that, I have a couple of them here. This is Mishak and his with his bike.
My name is Henyang Meshak Nchupetsang. I'm originally from the northwest in Mahikeng, just on the border before you get into Botswana. And the name of my business is called On Bike Works. The short-term goals now, obviously, is to finish refurbishing the shop, make sure the workshop comes in place where it should be.
So I've only got a little bit of time. It's only a couple-minute video, but I want to point out a couple of things while Mishak's talking.
Tools in store.
His bike shop is inside of a shipping container.
We'll have a
couple of restaurants were inside the shipping containers. If they're not inside the home, they're
new bikes, adult new bikes. And this section here will be for the repairs that are coming in. Right here where I'm standing, it will be the till point. And over this section here on the wall, we will have the display of the spares right around on the racks over there, and the kiddies' bikes will be displayed on
to be able
that
to
particular
invest in
retail
his
space.
bike shop. He's talking about bike races.
This container will be dedicated solely to
setting up a Westlake
spares
911 or
second-hand
help
bicycles.
line to be able
Because
to.
I still want to be able to
bike out
cater
and help them.
for the low-income group, because these are the people that made this
one
shop.
thing that was
These are the
pretty
people that
universal
enabled me
was
to
the
be able to
engagement
buy a
with the
torque
community.
wrench.
That was a lovely thing for,
to
I
be
think,
able
for all of our students to see and to understand. We learned so very much. We always do. But I think the thing that was just striking about this was just how much everyone loves where they are. Everyone is genuine about what they're trying to do, and the fact that we are able to take our expertise to assist them because they don't know how to make a video. We can help tell their story a little bit more effectively, and hopefully that'll help improve the entire township of Westlake. That's what we do. Questions, or we have a little time for that? I think so. On this time, actually, I was the only one who did not shark cage dive. I did last time. That's very blurry, and it's still blurry if there's a shark there. So I was like, you know what? I can take those photos and not go down this time. But yeah, we had, I think there was like eight or so different sharks on this one. It makes the study abroad office very nervous when we go shark cage diving. So if we do this again, we'll have to do it covertly. But I can't imagine not doing it if we go back to South Africa, because it's a great experience. Other questions about what we do? Yeah. We do have some. Actually, through a project that Sara headed up with Fifth Third. We did some work with Fifth Third, and our students did work with Fifth Third, and then they provided, it's Fifth Third. So they were like, hey, how about $53,000? We're like, oh, 5.3, yeah, that makes sense. And so then we're doling that out, using that to help with need and merit-based, to be able to offset some of the costs. And some of the study abroads are fairly inexpensive. I mean, when you're talking about going to a Central American country, the flights are usually the most expensive thing. Flights sometimes aren't that expensive. We try to make it as cost-effective as we can. And we're never going to, we like embracing the regions that we're in. And so we're never going to really fancy places, really fancy hotels. We try to keep it as cost-effective as possible. Safe, but cost-effective. But we do have some of those. And we've also done, for the last South Africa experience that I did, similar to Fifth Third, the students and I in the class did some work for Batesville Casket Company, and that helped offset some of their costs. So we try to make it as affordable as possible. Yeah, everywhere. If any of my colleagues are doing any kind of work in Antarctica that you would like documented, I'm there. Ideally, I would like to go there. I like cold. That's really cold. But the idea of environmental science and environmental videography is intriguing. So, yeah. But no, one of the nice things about our program is that we partner well with a lot of folks. I mentioned anthropology. You're going with marketing, is that right, Tracy? Yeah, marketing is part of the Czech Republic. So stories are everywhere. Love to find those stories and tell them as best we can. So yeah, we like the world. Yeah.
All right.
We're good? Thank you.
Cullick.
Hey,
all right, how are you?
Nice job.
You too as well.
I met somebody that knew you, Reagan.
Zach? Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah.
I've known Zach forever.
Yeah, he's doing some, here's the connection. My wife is there with her on high
Okay.
school.
Oh, he's doing a ton of work.
Yeah, my wife is.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
My daughter auditioned for his casting call.
All right, so as we're doing our switch out here, obviously a lot of students like Chris's work.
I just saw someone yesterday, so it was kind of ironic that I saw you sleeping.
All right, so just as a reminder, as we're getting ready to... All right, gentlemen. Don't leave, stay. Just remember there's lots of opportunities at lunch and at the reception for conversation. And I think Chris makes a great point about one of the reasons we're doing this is so you can learn about what your colleagues are doing and thinking about ways to collaborate. So that's always very exciting. And so with that, we have Jonathan Cullick, who's a professor in our English department, here to talk about some of his work with All the King's Men. So I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
What am I clicking to advance it?
Clicking here.
Oh, just what's the button? What button do I click? Just the one with the arrow on it. Okay, great. All right. Well, good morning. It's good to see you all here this morning. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, this book right here that you see, the picture of the book, that is my project. And it started in March of 2017 when I received a call from Leila Salisbury, the director of the University Press of Kentucky. She told me about a new project that the Kentucky Humanities Council was doing. This is a project for a statewide reading of the novel All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. And the idea is to have statewide discussions about this novel and its relevance to today's political climate. So it's been my pleasure to be working with the Kentucky Humanities Council now for a couple of years. She told me that what they needed for the program was a companion book. Would I be willing to write the book? So why All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren? Well, the reason is that this novel is widely considered to be one of the finest political novels in American literature. It was a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's one of those novels that always makes the list of 100 greatest novels of the century. So she told me that what they wanted in a companion book was a book to address the question, how is this novel, All the King's Men, relevant to today's political climate? So what I'd like to do is just briefly introduce you to this novel and explain why this novel. All the King's Men was written by Robert Penn Warren. He is a Kentucky writer, and he's also one of the most acclaimed literary figures of the 20th century in the United States. He's from Todd County, Kentucky. He also wrote, in addition to this great novel, he wrote a number of textbooks. He is in some ways responsible for the ways in which writing and literature have been taught for decades. He was also, I have to mention, he was just a great poet. And he's the only American writer to have received 2 Pulitzer Prizes, one in poetry and one in fiction. Well, when Robert Penn Warren worked at Louisiana State University, he became familiar with Governor Huey Long in the 1930s. It was difficult not to be familiar with Governor Long because he was pretty well known for being something of an authoritarian, something of a dictator. He was well known as being a genuine populist, but definitely using authoritarian methods. And so Warren decided to base the novel on Long. The novel is not about Huey Long. It is about authoritarians in general. And actually, when Warren first started writing it, he was living in Italy. So he had in mind, and this is pre-World War II, so he had in mind authoritarianism in general, but certainly Huey Long served as kind of the inspiration, I guess you could say, for this book. Now, so what is this book about? Well, I'm going to give you a really brief synopsis because I know a lot of people might not have read it. It's a really big novel. So I'm just going to make this really thumbnail sketch. There's a frame story in the novel. The novel is narrated by Jack Burton. He is a newspaper reporter who becomes a political aide to the boss, the governor, Governor Willie Stark. Jack Burton is doing opposition research throughout the novel. Willie Stark has given him this task. Dig up some dirt on a political opponent, Judge Irwin. Now, Jack Burton tells Willie Stark, you're not going to find any dirt on Judge Irwin. He's clean. But Willie Stark tells him in a famous passage in the novel, there is dirt on everyone and everywhere on God's green globe, you're going to find something. And that becomes a big frame story in the novel. Throughout that frame story, Jack Burton is also telling us the story of Willie Stark's rise to power. Now, Willie Stark was a kind of a policy wonk. He was not a successful politician. His speeches would consist of statistics and details and tax policy and all this. So in another famous passage in the novel, Jack Burton tells Willie Stark, look, stop trying to educate the voters. Just go for the gut, give them something to believe in, make them feel something. They're going to vote for you. Well, Willie Stark tries that advice, and it works. So Willie Stark's administration becomes characterized by graft and corruption, intimidation and patronage. Willie says that the government's like a machine, and sometimes it takes a little grease to make it run smoothly. And as far as he's concerned, all of humanity is corrupt, and therefore, if you want to do good, you're just going to have to be willing to get dirty. And so you can probably see that there are some themes in this novel that are very important, really to all political climates. Major themes about how you get good things done in any kind of a political process. Now, just to let you know how All the King's Men has had some effect on American culture, it was made into a film in 1949, swept the Academy Awards pretty much, really good movie. It was made also into a movie in 2006, not a very great movie, but it does stick really nicely to the novel. It adheres to the novel more. So if you can put up with Sean Penn's overacting, it really is well worth watching. All the King's Men has also had an influence on other books and films in American culture. All the President's Men, about the Watergate scandal, gets its title directly from All the King's Men, and Primary Colors, the novel and the film, were based upon the re-election campaign of Bill Clinton. But that novel, in much of its structure, characterization, takes a lot from Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. Quick example, there's a character in Primary Colors who digs up dirt on people, and she's called the Dustbuster. And significantly, in this novel, as in All the King's Men, we learn that if your career consists of digging up dirt on other people, you're going to get yourself pretty dirty in the process. So a lot to learn there. All the King's Men also gets mentioned in newspaper and magazine articles about politics. And a great example, actually, would just be the 2016 campaign. References to the novel appeared frequently, every once in a while in relation to Hillary Clinton, quite often in relation to Donald Trump. And actually, I would mention that those references came as much, if not more, from conservative writers as from more liberal political columnists. Okay, well, my assignment then from the University Press was, what lessons can we learn about our current political climate from this novel? How can it contribute to the discussion? So it was kind of a good news, bad news situation. The good news was, hey, really short. They want it to be usable by the general public, 35,000 words. Great, cool. But the challenge was, we'd like a draft in 6 months. Now, you know, I'm teaching full-time, traveling that summer. I'm already involved in a really big research project with a colleague at University of Cincinnati, and I'm supposed to plunk this down in the middle of it, and I thought, no way. I'm just going to have to say no. Well, anyway, 5 minutes later, I sort of realized if I say no, somebody else is going to say yes. So of course I'm going to go ahead and say yes to do this. Well, I had to answer this question: how is the novel relevant to today's times? And I'd better come up with an answer pretty quickly because I'm on deadline. And that's when the idea came to me. Well, ask other people, specifically ask people in government. And so I contacted over 70 individuals in Kentucky government, all branches of the government, both sides of the legislature in equal numbers, plus additional state legislators from Warren's home county, Todd County. I contacted our U.S. senators. I contacted a lot of judges, and I have to say the judges were the most responsive, which was really heartening. It was really actually very heartening to know that I'm getting all these emails from judges who know literature and history and philosophy. And so that was kind of a nice thing to find out about our judges. And I contacted university presidents. And then later on in the process, I needed a little more response. So actually with the assistance of Martin Eichert, I contacted some journalists as well. The questions that I asked them were first just very simply, when did you read it and why? Just initial reaction, that's all. And then your initial impressions, but then the big question: how does this book remain relevant for government officials and citizens of Kentucky and the United States? Well, among my contributors, I wish I'd gotten more contributors, but then the quality was really good. And this is humanities research. The quality mattered more than the quantity. So I got really good responses. So I was able to interview former Governor Beshear, Supreme Court Justice Bill Cunningham. You can see the list here yourself. I have to say, corresponding with the judges was just such a pleasure. Justice Cunningham, for example, every time I would say, okay, thank you, Judge, because he has worked it, he would just write back to me. He wanted to talk about poetry, literature in general, and so it was really kind of cool to be pen pals with a Supreme Court justice for a while. And again, very heartening to know how well he knows literature. And then a number of journalists from the state as well. Well, conclusions from the contributors. Interestingly, a lot of them came to the novel when they were in school. I found that impressive because I didn't read this novel till I was in graduate school. I was introduced to Robert Penn Warren's work when I was an undergraduate, but I was introduced to his poetry. It was a professor who introduced me to his poetry. But they did return to it as adults. It is a very challenging novel for a young person. And I love going into the Amazon comments and reading responses. You can always tell who was assigned the novel in school, and they're always complaining, nothing happens in this novel, nothing. And this writer needs to learn how to put a period in a sentence. Other things that drew them to the plot, elements, romance and suspense, the language itself, which is gorgeous. But my contributors overall, these people in government were saying when a young person tells them they want to go into government, they tell that young person, here's a book that you ought to read. Here's a novel that you ought to read. Well, let me tell you my answer. This is my own answer as to the relevance of this novel. And it all comes down to one line from the novel. He could talk so good, the boss could. Couldn't nobody talk like him? This line is spoken by Sugar Boy. Sugar Boy he's a street kid. He's bullied. And then one day, the governor of the state points to him and says, you're going to be my bodyguard and my driver. And now he's packing a gun, and he's a big man. And that is a metaphor for what Willie Stark and the demagogue does for everybody. They fill a need. Why do people support a populist demagogue like this? Because in some way he, and it's usually a he, is filling some void that they have, and Sugar Boy is a great example of that. And so in my project, I do a lot of analysis of political speeches from the novel to get into, okay, so what are these tools, these linguistic strategies that the demagogue uses? And the relevance to today that I draw toward the end of my project is really the necessity of continuing to teach rhetoric in the schools. We need to make sure that in the Common Core state standards and Kentucky core academic standards that we do keep a focus on rhetoric, and that we do that at the university level. And I'm glad to say here at NKU in English 101, we do. We keep that focus. This project, I just want to mention, the Kentucky Humanities Council project is continuing for several more months. We're having panels all around the state. We had one here at NKU, Kentucky Humanities Magazine, locally here in Kentucky, has covered it, of course, and they've published part of my book as well. The national magazine of the National Endowment for the Humanities has also published on the project and interviewed those of us connected with it. Actually, I'm really thrilled. Next week, I'm going to do an interview with the National Review magazine, William F. Buckley's magazine. They do a podcast on great books, and I look forward to talking with them next week. We are bringing this project to book festivals in Ohio and just all over Kentucky. Actually, next month, I'll be doing a presentation at the Kentucky Book Festival. Oh, and I have to say, the day before, they have Kentucky Book Festival High School Day. So I'm going to be doing a master class for about 250 to 300 high school students. So I'm very, very excited about that. And yes, my PowerPoint's going to have that NKU logo. And I'm going to be staying afterwards for lunch to talk with the kids, because I figure, hey, this is an opportunity to, encourage them to think about college. Well, I'm going to conclude with this photograph, which Mark Nykirk provided to me, and I think it's a beautiful picture, because this is Robert Penn Warren. I love this writer, and, it's amazing to me that a professor introduces him to me when I'm an undergraduate, and here I am 30-plus years later. I'm still reading his work. In fact, right now, I'm rereading his final book of poetry right before he died, Altitudes and Extensions, and, it's, almost bringing me to tears. It's so beautiful. My takeaway from this project is this project, for me, shows the energy that can result in humanities research when we reach off campus. And I've discovered that in talking with and interviewing these people who are not academics, but they've read the book, they've got something to say about it. And so that is definitely something that I want to bring to future projects. I'm currently working with a colleague at University of Cincinnati on a project. We're now 3 years into it on Harper Lee. And we have invited high school teachers from around the country to contribute to that project as well. So for me, this project has just energized something, a possibility of something that we can do with humanities research. Well, I do want to conclude with a slide of acknowledgments, because in order to get a project like this done on a deadline such as I had, it takes the help of some wonderful people, and I had that help from a number of people here on the NKU campus. And so I just want to leave this up and conclude by acknowledging and thanking them. Thank you so much. And questions? Yes, David. Sure. Yeah, that's such an important question, and I've had that conversation with a lot of teachers. This novel is on the exemplar list for the Common Core state standards, so it's right there as a novel to give to high school students. No, wait, let me correct that. I think it's on the AP list. That's the list it's on. Okay. That's the list more that it belongs on. This is and then for undergraduates as well. This is a very challenging novel because there are a number of subplots. I like to compare this novel to a beautiful Kentucky quilt. It's very beautiful to look at and serves a really good purpose, but it's also made up of many, many parts. So taking a young reader through it would mean navigating a lot of parts. Now, some of those parts have to do with a man who is in his, late 30s, early 40s, thinking back to his youth, and he has certain regrets, and he's got sort of a cynical tone toward life. In a way, this novel will make more sense to those who have lived some life. So, I think it does work better with a more mature reader. And I think that's why so many of the people I contacted said, yeah, read it when I was young, but didn't really get I had to come back to it. So yeah, that'd be my recommendation for students. Yes, other questions? Emily, yeah. Oh no, that's yeah. Emily's asking if I had had more time, what would I have done? Oh, believe me, I've thought about that. But yes, absolutely. Well, ideally, I would have wanted 2 years with a sabbatical, and what I would have done is I could have been much more thorough in coverage of whom I was contacting, because ultimately, this was a project that someone else chose and offered. It wasn't one that came from me. So ultimately, at the end of the day, as someone in journalism said to me, at the end of the day, when you're on a deadline, you take the calls of the people who call you back. And that's true, you do. So I do wish that I had been able to pester. I mean, I was a pest to some of them to try to. I knew people who worked in some of the politicians' offices, and I was trying to get these politicians to respond. But I could have been a little, more of a pest, as well as broadening out, because it would be very easy actually to look at this project and say, well, but why didn't you ask so and so? And I'd say, yep, you're right. Why not? But again, when you're on a deadline, you do what you can. Having said that, though, I think the quality of response is really good, the ones I used. There was only one response that I could not use because it just didn't directly answer my questions. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Did I work with students, undergraduates? No. And, again, given the length of time and the scope of the project, again, if we look at, say, the longer, bigger project, hey, that would be great to have that research assistance. But I am going to very much give credit to a graduate student, and that's Jill Leibish. And a lot of thanks to Robert Zai, who, the two of them consulted with me. I sent them this, I said, I've got a big assignment and I need you to help now. and so Robert, Jill was working with Robert for credit, and Robert, gave this to her as this is some of the credit. This is going to be one of your projects that you're going to do as a grad student, because I needed to do a very fast and thorough review of every place All the King's Men has been mentioned in all newspapers and magazines, and journals over, the last 10 years. And it was, so that was pretty big. Yep. Okay. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
So we're running a little bit ahead of time. And out of respect for Kirsten's students who are coming to hear her speak, we're going to take about a 10-minute bathroom break, stretch, talk to your colleagues. Please come back. We have some more wonderful presentations ahead, but we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.